Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call to order our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting for Thursday, September 5th, 2024, and our first meeting of the 2024-2025 school year. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga-Scugog Island First Nation, Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Moving on to the DDSB's Indigenous Rights and Human Rights Statement. The Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subject to action with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination. And we will start with roll call.
I'm Donna Edwards, and I'm trustee for DDSB. Elizabeth Daniel, member at large. Melissa Cook, elementary school representative. Tracy Redding, secondary school representative.
Since Renee Bell, autism in my area.
Charmaine Brown, interior parent name for children.
Connor Jenkinson, Assistant Lead Principal of Inclusive Student Services.
Lisa Ryan, recording secretary.
Jen McLaughlin, Wellness Services.
And Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Education.
And Eva Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children and SEAC Chair. We have regrets this evening from trustee Kelly Miller and from Ron Jarvis from the Learning Disabilities Association. And unfortunately, Morgan Cameron, one of our members at large, has resigned, so we'll miss Morgan. Okay, and we'd like to welcome our guests online. Anybody who may be watching this. Moving on then to the approval of the agenda. There is one change to be made. In number 6, it talks about the approval of 21st, 2024, and that was actually June 20th, 2024. If you want to make that change. With that change, does anybody else have any concerns with the agenda as it stands? Okay, then if we can get a motion to approve the agenda, that'd be great. Elizabeth, seconders? Allison, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, then we will move on to the approval of minutes from June 20th. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Are there any questions or concerns with respect to the minutes? Okay, then can we get a motion to approve? Donna, seconds? Sensorette, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, then moving on to number 7, staff reports, school year startup.
So Connor and I are just gonna say things all open. Connor's gonna take the middle and I'll close. So we made a decision as a team that tonight was really important to bring you an update on the start of the school year. So we will start our inclusive student services impact updates with October. And the topic for October will be informed consent. So I think that's really important to communicate out to the community and schools as a foundation for service. So please look forward to that in your October packet. As of this week, we have grown as a district. So 2 of our schools came on board right after the Civic Law weekend, 2 of our elementaries, 3 of our secondary schools are entering their second-ish week. They started a couple weeks ago, and the rest of our schools opened their doors on Tuesday morning, and for a total of 84,000 students in schools across the district, which is slightly higher than we were anticipating as we went into the summer months. So our planning team is quite skilled at planning our enrollments, and staffing works really, really closely with them. So what that means is that administrators such as Tracy and Melissa have been working with their school teams to make adjustments. We do have one staffing reorg date for elementary in the system coming up, because we're gonna try and reduce number of transitions for kids. But staffing was added right before the start of the school year, for the enrollments abated at that time. And then we really thank our school teams for working through enrollments quite quickly, with our team supporting for the students that require accommodations to move plans into place so that all 84,000 students, were able to access learning spaces. We'd also like to give, appreciation and shout out to two teams that work generally behind the scenes, but are absolutely integral to the experience of students. Facility Services has July and August as two of their busiest months in the school year calendar overall. Not only just cleaning spaces, we've opened a brand new school in North Oshawa, and kids and staff are in there. Many of you know Kyla, who is principal, who opened the building with her administrative partner and team. So that's gone smoothly. Students at Mary Street are in essentially a brand new building with the porta pack excavated and gone, and the new building constructed. That's exciting. Connor and I have both taught in that building. So it's really great for students accessing learning in downtown Oshawa to have a really solid, brand new part, their classrooms for them to access. And then our friends up in Beaver River in Beaverton moved from the former Thor site back over to what was formerly the Beaverton site into their brand new building as well. So lots of pieces from a facilities project. We were up at Uxbridge Secondary a couple weeks ago and saw the roofing project be completed across the street at Joseph Gould. Lots and lots of work that's not always evident as students enter classes. And we often comment on the work that educators do, which is absolutely phenomenal to get classroom spaces and learning ready. It's also about the space itself and the work of facilities to do that. We know as well that when enrollment bumps like that, transportation is a Jenga puzzle to begin with. And when enrollments shift to that degree with significantly higher numbers of students coming in, with a percentage of those students qualifying for transportation, that also requires adjustments. So what's normally about a 4 or 5 month process was worked right through and continues this week in terms of transportation planning. And we are pleased, and was shared with board on Tuesday night, that all bus routes currently scheduled were full and running. Drivers, buses, fully staffed on Tuesday morning, which is not the case across the province. And so we just, before Connor talks to you about a bit of an experience for our department today, wanted to make sure that not only do we thank our educators, our families did amazing things in August getting kids ready for school. And we recognized around the table at SEAC that for a lot of families, it's water bottles and brand new shoes. And for a lot of our families, it's also diapers and feeding tubes and insulin needles and different things as well. So we always keep that in mind, that school start looks very different in very differentiated ways. Pathway and orientation training for some kids, pre-visits and transitions. So lots of kids into buildings for little visits before school started to get a schema for where they would be coming and their transitions that way. And so a lot of people, both on the home team and the school team and the board team, working together to have the first few days of school go rather quite smoothly, with great heart and great commitment to kids, all 84,000 of them. So that's kind of school start. And I'm going to turn it over to Connor to share a little bit about the machine of inclusive student services and what startups look like for our teams.
For sure. So inclusive services, we are a large and multifaceted interdisciplinary team. And we're a department that I say as a BEd, we are the strong minority within that in terms of professional designation within that department. And that's actually the power of the department and the beauty of the department, where we work alongside registered health professionals, we work alongside strong educators, we work in so many different facets and ways. And we actually had the amazing opportunity, and that was actually a pretty cool opportunity because we haven't been together as a large department together in one space to be able to do some learning together for quite a while. So today we had the entire department learning about DDSB's multi-year strategic plan that again, SEAC is aware of. And we walked through what that actually means and those 3 connected areas around well-being, connection, and meaningful learning. and really walking the fact that they are truly interconnected for all of our learners, and we've also guided principals that really walk through that. We also had the opportunity to walk through some resources and get some really good feedback about how we work together as a team. So when we sit together as a leadership team within the department, there's been lots of work on how do we guide that, because the process of working with registered health professionals, it's different when we actually consider what, the information that we need to be considering, we need to be considering. We need to be considering, we need to be considering all these layers around confidentiality. And there's lots of things that are different between the Ontario college teachers and many of our other studies as well. So working through all those layers and then having the chance to actually be in space and seeing it was really neat to just actually feel the energy of the team, because they were excited. They could see, they are excited to go and do the work and to get work started, to begin the things happening. They've already been in schools, they've already been out, they've been there. So having them work together, and not just with a table of instructional facilitators sitting together, BS sitting together, we personally moved the teams so that they were sitting in different teams, and moving in interdisciplinary ways. We had lots of good feedback. We had lots of great discussion around even PPM 128, around conduct and some of those accommodations that need to actually be considered around a lot of our learners as well. And how does that play in? So there was lots of exploration and really energy from the team. They're excited to do the work. The feedback that we got from teams is they saw us out as a leadership team and said that was fun. That was something that happened. They said, what we kept hearing is they said they felt energized to just go. They just wanted to be out. They wanted to be with students. They wanted to be providing supports that they do. So it was a really neat time to be able to bring people together in that large format, to be able to work together.
Okay, so two of the things that they gave feedback on this afternoon, is we realized that sometimes our services can be a little bit of a mystery to unpack, either if they're on teams within the department or with family caregivers at our schools. And so as a leadership team, we have drafted a document introducing your inclusive student services integrated team and the different departments, the different teams within the department, just a brief. And so we took that to them for feedback because it's about their work in supporting schools and supporting kids together. And so that's part of the feedback they gave us today, and we'll take that away. Of course, we tried to build in differentiation and universal design ourselves. So there was time to give feedback today in a couple different formats, and we've asked them to give feedback by the end of next Friday so that we can culminate it by the end of the month. So we're hoping to bring that back to you by October, SEAC, November at the latest. We want to do it properly. But that will be circulated here as well for that. And then as Connor said, PPM around the code of conduct is what you've been hearing in the news around cell phones. Quite often the word ban is used within the media, and that is not what it is in terms of application. It's around uninterrupted learning, removing distractions in the classroom, and ensuring positive school climate. So there is always, as Connor said, that ability for purposeful use. And there is a bit of a different strategy from early elementary through to secondary. So when I think of the land in which Melissa lives as an elementary administrator versus Tracy in secondary, that does look a little different. And as Connor said, our teams were together along with positive school climates to gather input on the accommodations that we may see playing out for students, and the examples that we put forward for their thinking and to gather other ideas from the tables. Hearing aid volume adjustments are often done through apps, glucagon monitoring. We also have a couple of safe apps built into our suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention plan in terms of keeping kids safe, and of course, executive functioning supports as well. And so the plan is, again, gathering their input as people that are sitting side by side with students advocating, is we're gonna turn that into a tool for school leaders, just for some considerations of accommodations that requests that may come forward. Or as school leaders look at universal design for learning with our teaching and learning team and differentiation with us, how that also plays in, because we have heard some families are concerned where we have built up skill sets in kids to utilize their device in subtle ways, and we don't want that stripped out of their learning plans. So that's the language around the change in the code of conduct. We also greatly appreciate that what the code of conduct change does is it removes individual school nuances and puts one code of conduct for the entire district. So if students are transitioning between schools, the code of conduct is consistent across all sites at this point. And we'll just close off too, we're doing a book study in our part of our department and out with special education resource to teachers. And so we'll be threading Jillian's book on ableism in education through quite a bit of what we're doing this year. Taking a look at structures and practices. Author is happy to provide members of SEAC if you're interested, and we can bring a monthly quote from the book and maybe add to our discussion. But two of the quotes that we left resonating in the room this afternoon are these two. An inclusive classroom, and we also extend that to workplaces for staff, is a place where all students experience a sense of belonging and social citizenship. And Jillian defines those as membership, inclusion, shared power, and value. And I think that's really important and very distinct from each other. And as well, an inclusive classroom modifies the environment to fit the student, not the student to fit the environment. And so again, our teaching and learning team, as Connor said, meaningful learning, part of our multi-year strategic plan is really looking at universal design for learning. We did have a broadcasted speaker on the PA day prior to the school year. Marco spoke to all educators and all staff across the district on universal design, and that went out to all of our sites in simultaneous broadcast on the PD day. So our teaching and learning team has really picked up on universal design and embedding that in the footprint of how we deliver learning and curriculum experiences, and then through to differentiation. So I think this will dovetail nicely. And again, we can send out, we'll bring them to October and maybe just elevate one quote on each of our agendas or resource package each month that speaks to us. And that's our update, but 84,000. And I think many members around the table remember when our number was 55. And it's long ago, but not that long ago. So definitely on the increase, and with strong projections for growth in Durham for a number of reasons. I think we will end up coming back with an increasing number to this table. Yeah.
Okay, does anybody have any questions with respect to the staff report? The start of the school year?
So many questions about transportation, but it's okay. It's only like day 3. 4.
We're working, we acknowledge that
Yeah.
collaboratively, we're working through some.
Yeah, there's been, I'm talking with the surgeon today, she's like, it's never ending. Which is questions and comments,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
emails, phone calls.
That's fair. I
Yeah,
think
and it's that all the time, so.
fair, and I think school teams are fielding a lot of transportation questions. I know our transportation
Yeah.
team has been working overtime. And on the individual routing, I know Connor and Michelle, the facilitators, that's been the majority of the last week or so, has been programming transportation. So working through that, but I do appreciate it's probably one of the world's worst and most complex Jenga puzzles. Because one student in the middle of a route disrupts the route. And most of the routes, particularly South Highway 7, are already multi-tiered. And I think the other thing is we make a commitment to independence for kids is walking through that progressive steps of, can a student walk? Can they ride a 70 passenger? Is an 18 needed? And then for very few, is it individualized transportation? So just walking that through so that we're not creating situations that move away from inclusion on assumption, but rather move it as far to independence as we can for each of our kids. But I appreciate that families are still, a couple families are still waiting for some decisions and plans to be solidified. I was out at Pringle Creek on Monday to help take the little kindergartens off the buses. And they were all using their tap system, so all the kids have cards so that they tap onto the bus and tap off of the buses. One, that's a safety feature, and two, it'll give us some really good ridership data that may help alleviate some busing pressures as well.
Any other questions? Oh, so, okay, then we can move on to the board report.
There was also a change to the trustees' code of conduct. As far as ministry put out a regulation at the end of, dated July 30th, I think we're 29th. And we were supposed to have, some of the, required, dates to change our code of conduct was August 28th. So, needless to say, we had a special board meeting instead of our regular standing. We had a special, well, we did have that as well, but we had a special board meeting to address our changes that were required under the new regulation 46397 around electronic meetings and meeting attendance. As far as that's concerned, and so but they were required, they were changed, but, I mean, there's a lot of questions are still around the changes on the regulation, especially when it comes to equity and so forth, and recognized, reasons for absences for trustees, but, and I will say it again, the industry doesn't seem to recognize the fact that their role of trustee is an honorarium and we're supposed to be part-time and not full-time. Anyways, so I'll just say that. And then we went into so we had our special board meeting and then we went into our standing meeting. Again, we had just a quick update as far as the school year, and one of the things that has been a little bit of an issue, again, with increased enrollment is around portables and the delay of getting some of the portables. So unfortunately, some schools have had to basically create temporary classrooms until then, but again, Michelle is working very, very hard to alleviate those issues within those schools. And so, and yes, of course, transportation is always a particular issue, but as Superintendent Henry always said, is that we're in pretty good shape when it came to other school boards where it was in the news, that other school boards not having bus drivers had to cancel routes, and we had our routes up and running. Was it absolutely 100% efficient? Not necessarily, but we did have schools, kids on buses in our standard of getting to our schools, which was great. Of course, we welcomed our, a couple of our new student trustees. And we also received response back from around education development charges. And it's quite, the response was quite disheartening. Because basically, we do not have the money boards because of the way the cap is put on by the ministry, that we can only increase education development charges by $300 per year. And under the bylaws and so forth, we already know that we're in significant deficit to purchase lands for new schools. And coming basically fully fund over the next 15 years, we're looking at $1.14 billion that is needed, and we will not have that. Which will have an impact on even to where we have to increase, and then there's a point where we can only increase our borrowing bylaw that we have. We can only, there's a cap on that the ministry allows. So somewhere, something's gonna happen around, for school boards, especially growing school boards like Durham is, on how are we going to pay for the lands that we need, to continue to support our schools, that are needed within the region. But basically, the response back was, we hear you, we've had some discussions, although minimal discussions with our staff, and that was about it. So it's something that it is a increased pressures for sure going on, because cost of land continues to increase significantly with everything else. And also construction costs continue to increase significantly. And that's about it.
Anybody have any questions for Don with respect to the board report? I would only have one comment. to make and say that the same thing goes for development charges overall. The way that they've been designed is, there's a shortfall from municipalities if developers build a certain portion as, low, below market value housing, which is 80% of what the store housing. So then they're exempt from development charges on those properties. And, yeah, it's a problem, because of shortfall plans on school boards and municipalities.
Not in the cities, and municipalities are in the best interests to make sure that a working neighborhood is there.
Well, the way,
From a planning perspective.
yeah, the way that
It's
works.
a dumb question, I know, so-
No, it's actually not a dumb question. It's actually one I can answer just because that's what the area I work in. Right. So I can actually answer that. Development is supposed to pay for development. So if the first development goes in, sometimes they have like agreements where, front-end agreements where one developer will put the money up in front to increase the road size, put the sewers in or whatever, and the next developments go up, pay back that developer. That's how it's supposed to work. Where they pay through development charges, which is to the municipality, which is how they build the infrastructure. So that's how development is supposed to pay for development. So if you decrease the property or the development charges that the developer is required to pay, then the only other way to pay for that infrastructure is through tax increases on property taxes of existing residents. So in other words, existing residents are paying for development that is not gonna occur, or isn't occurring. So that's how it works. And, so it's a problem overall for municipalities as well. Because they're losing that money, and the only way, much like a school board, they can't run a deficit, so the only way they can do it is to raise property taxes. And anybody out of Durham knows how that's happened, how that's worked out this year, right? And a lot of the municipalities.
And just to add that with the, you know, building home stocks or sort of thing, there's been a lot of agreements and municipalities in particular, what in Durham for sure uses its stronger powers to continue to push increased density and high rises and so forth through. And you're not going to get the development charges depending on their agreements. Not that is going to pay for the infrastructure, that's going to support those new rises and increased density development. So
So it's complicated, but the infrastructure essentially, that's how it's supposed to, development's supposed to pay for development, how it's supposed to work.
It's supposed to. Is the operative word in that sentence.
yes.
All right.
Okay, if there's no more questions, on that, then, we'll move on to our presentation regarding the parent and guardian guide to IPRC.
Thank you. We're gonna be brief in introducing this because we're actually hoping to use this as a working input session for SEAC. So SEAC will be familiar with the Parent Guardian Guide to Identification Placement Review Committee, or IPRC, that we revised last spring. At least brought a few copies just in case individuals would like hard copies beside you. While we were working through IPRCs with schools and families over last spring, a couple things kind of came up. So one was that perhaps an auditory walkthrough of some of the information would be helpful in terms of making it accessible for some families. And also too, that we could go a bit deeper in a little bit of the explanation because the guide itself sits fairly legislatively. The revisions we made last year were to amplify the opportunities for parent, caregiver, and student input at all steps of the process, and to make sure that that invitation and the expectation for collaboration and the opportunity to do that was in our publicly facing documents. And so the other aspect that came out through kind of that IPRC process through the spring was that, and I think we've talked about it a couple times here, is that a lot of families were seeking alternatives to regular class with indirect, thinking that that would put an EA beside their little human and their youth in classrooms, which it does not do. The Education Act refers to it as a special education teacher. And so we also added into our documentation that as a district, although the ministry offers 5 placement options, we use with withdrawal assistance and with resource assistance, mainly for our 2 itinerant teams. So where there is a teacher of blind low vision or a teacher of deaf hard of hearing, working directly with the student on an alternate curriculum, such as learning Braille, that's where we use those placements to reflect the time either with that additional specialist teacher inside their classroom working with them or removing them to work one-on-one. It can be quite challenging to learn a language inside of a busy classroom that's very sensory heavy. So we thought we would take a look at maybe amplifying or providing a different option for the information. We also know as a district, both in terms of growth and succession planning, that we have a lot of CERTs or special education resource teachers new to the role, and we have a lot of administrators new to the role. And so sometimes we get into habits of practice or legislation can be challenging to read. And so we thought creating a guide that kind of slowed it down, took it step by step again with both a visual and an auditory component to it would anchor consistency of practice across the district and give kind of a professional learning tool at the same time as a communication tool for families. One of our mantras as a department leadership team is we try and create documents that have one version, and that one version serves both internal facing for staff for professional learning, as well as external to families, caregivers, and community. I think sometimes when we create separate, sometimes you need to create an internal and external, but where we do that, sometimes it creates a dissonance of what is the information that's different rather than where's the consistency. So we try and do one version of all of our information through our department for transparency and clarity. And so what we've done is the slides itself, so you can see that the front of it, and the intention is that once we finalize the content, we are gonna do an auditory recording with closed captioning running where it doesn't duplicate the language that's on the slide and looking for accommodations that way and inclusion. But the plan is to make that recording and then make it publicly available on the website and be referencing it within our CERT professional learning and school leaders as well. And so the cover, we refer to our multi-year strategic plan and supporting all students. Again, you see the language that we refer to students, programming needs. We draw from the special education plan in terms of the importance of our commitments to every student. Because what we also are trying to kind of put a bit of a pause in is the language of an IPRC being used as a verb. No student needs to be IPRC'd. It is a process of collaboration and decision. It is not a verb done to or done on behalf of. And so just anchoring our commitment to all students and the differentiation within classrooms. And this also amplifies that accommodation is done as best practice and is not necessarily predicated on an IPRC being in place. Lots of different levels of differentiation and accommodation are possible in a classroom that's responsive to students. The rest of the information in the document, we're gonna ask that you take a few minutes, maybe in partners, to go through, is drawn directly from the guide. Again, for us, we felt that consistency was really important, that if the guide, and we'll pass them around, if a guide and a PowerPoint supporting the guide looked different, then that might create some distrust or erode the clarity that it's meant to help. So we moved some language over. We didn't move the entirety of the guide over. And so we want to make sure that the information in the PowerPoint is thorough. What we did was we moved over the most information we thought we would need. And what we're hoping, because the PowerPoint is still quite long, is that you will point us in the direction of anything based on your conversations with families or within your organizations that doesn't need to be part of it. Because I think from an accessibility perspective, we're too long on content. And then the other aspect we'd like your feedback on is, are there slides that have content on the slide that should be tightened and just moved into the speaking notes that will accompany that slide or the slide, both in terms of their individual content. And then always, if there's anything missing that doesn't answer a question, we'd like to hear that. You will note that at the end, and I apologize for those online, by flipping through slides quite quickly. But for the purpose of the table, and again, the PowerPoint goes through the IPRC in the order of the process too. We thought that was really important. Gives description on the placements and what happens if you don't agree. And some other accompanying documents. We did include, and hope that it's okay with SEAC. We did include reference to this table as a resource for families too. Honoring that SEAC is trying to amplify presence in the district. We want to make sure that any opportunity that we can, we thread to the commitment of this table and supporting the work as well. So that's with appreciation and support for the work to raise consciousness about this table. So if it's okay with your chair, what we'd like to do is queue, and usually when we do turn-in talks, we go offline and pause the live stream just so that when there's multiplicity of conversations around the room. What we'd like to do is break into smaller groups and give you 15?
Yeah.
10 or 15 minutes to just talk and go through it. And then Connor, Lisa, and I are really happy to take feedback from SEAC as well as our school leaders. If that.
Yep, that works. Yep. Sure.
We're good.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're just gonna, go around the table and, briefly talk about some of the things that we've come up with and then we can talk about if anybody wants some more time with the document and provide some more input, afterwards. Okay, yeah, why don't we start over here with Charmaine and Allison?
Okay, I just put a mint in my belly. I'm going the other direction. Nothing like. I'll just start, you can jump in. So I think the thing that we thought about was, right from the get-go, that there could be an opening slide that, says something like, when and why would an IPRC be discussing your child's needs? And, we felt that this kind of gave the impression that the IPRC was launched because of a teacher observation. But if I was a parent who just moved into the neighborhood and had a child with a diagnosis, I would come with all of that information. So we wanted to make it clear that parents can launch that process as well. To make any notes on, yeah. Oh, no, you go ahead. This was one that, this bothered me for consistency's sake on page 9. Slide 9, page 5, IPRC committee, and then the opening lines, the IPRC team. Just would throw someone off. Is that the same, the team, the same as a committee? Do you want to talk about that one? That was yours.
Yeah, slide 12 on page 6. We've just gone through talking about the planning for IPRC, who participates, what the roles are, and then it's just visually and what it says on slide 12, it looks like this declaration. So you're gonna have all this input, but most students will be placed here, and this is considered the most, you're already kind of, it sounds like you're making a decision before, even though you're having the options, or how your input is going. So we went a little further, I think page 10. No. Sorry, page 10, slide 19, after you talk about the 5 placement options, and maybe that's where you would put a statement like that, because now you're giving all the options, but then it's stating, but there was another slide that kind of talked about that, it's a little bit more friendly.
Yes.
In language. Page 8, slide 16. A regular classroom placement should be considered as the first most inclusive option. But saying the same thing as that other slide, but a little, softer, a little more inclusive. And,
Yes, no,
Slide 13, which is on page 7, we wondered if during the IPRC meeting, the 5 options are made known to the parent. And if so, that should perhaps be said. And if not, we would strongly argue that they should be. I would like as a parent to go into that meeting knowing what the 5 possible outcomes may be, and I'd like to be able to recommend where I'd like my child to be placed.
Makes that a permanent?
Yeah.
So for us, in terms of a process, the IPRC should be confirming consultations that have occurred. So no parent or caregiver should be at a meeting where options are presented for the first time and being put in a position of giving feedback in the moment.
Okay.
And it is a bit tricky because technically by the structure, the committee is staff. And so it's making sure so what we do is we try to work through processes of care conferences and consultation. And legislatively and rightful to practice, as you say, the parent caregiver guide to IPRC has to be presented in front of the IPRC being scheduled.
Okay.
And so I'm just thinking through our communication processes and maybe in there elevating the 5 placements. IPRCs can be anywhere from 7-10 minutes to half an hour, and a lot of our families say, we're good if you're rolling it over, please change the strengths and needs and interests to this, but go ahead and do it. And so we never want that to be a contentious, sometimes that ultimate decision of are we moving into a place center, are we not, is being decided in that last step with family. But usually if we're presenting options, they're coming in advance with families having time to consult with community supports and no, but the IPRC guide, legally needs to be presented in advance of the invitation and should be presented annually.
So that being said, Andrea, I'm just wondering if back on slide 4, that statement could be added.
Okay.
Something like, these materials will be provided to you if your child is going to be having an IPRC.
Excellent, thank you.
I think that's it. Is that it? That was it for us.
That's great, thank you so much. And does that make sense with the, it's important, but we'll.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so parents would receive this prior to it,
They receive
they receive that.
this.
Okay.
Okay, just quickly, while it's on my mind, because, when Charmaine and Allison pointed out on page 5. Top slide, the IPRC committee and IPRC team. It's also not necessary because IPRC is, the C is committee as it is, so that. Yeah, so that doesn't need
It's
to be
always a
there.
struggle for us, 'cause
Yeah.
Yeah,
if somebody doesn't unpack the acronym, then they don't know that it's that.
so that's done at the front of the document, the IPRC, it is defined. There, so hopefully that is, but yeah, it's like, it's kind of. Cause then they might be saying, well, what does that under C stand for, right? So,
We always kind of struggle with that one because it's the IPRC. Yeah, we don't wanna call it an IPR. Committee, yeah.
okay. So moving on to sense for number 10.
Okay, I'll start with the nice easy stuff. Foxborough. Goes light, it goes dark, anybody with any kind of sensory issues or learning disabilities, that's really tough. As well as like on page 6, the font goes from parents and guardians and students to most students with special education. And we need to have it even. I also
Not yet.
Yes. I also noticed that the language of the document, for those who are uneducated or very acclimatized to the Western world, very good. But most government documents should be written with the language of a grade 5 document. So I would love that review time. I also believe that there should be, some kind of addendum that has a glossary of terms and the rules. And if I was doing it in a meeting sense, it would be a link that I could send in the chat or in the document sense at the end of the document. If I was doing it in a meeting too, I may also put a link for Google Translate for families to be able to translate the audio into the language of their choice while the meeting is happening. So we also felt that parents don't know enough about this at a time, like depending on the school that you're going to. You may have had a meeting with the school, but you wouldn't have known it was a care conference. And you wouldn't have known that you could have initiated a care conference, which is not represented in this as well. We talked a lot about the parents going in, not understanding what is today happening. And we feel like that needs to be better talked about. More info, the information is not clear, so sometimes the information is given, but parents aren't asking the right questions because they're busy trying to decipher the words that the professional just used. We want the document to seem like a parent team focus rather than a board focus, right? Because, on page 12. Okay, so it starts on page 11. The IEP would be developed for your child. And then 2 points down, we talk about the team can be involved. And it happens again on page 12, where your input is very important, but it's the third point. And I think that it needs to be set up like it's a team right from the beginning. And it doesn't speak anywhere about like the sitting of review or if I can initiate a review to say, I think my child was doing well or not doing well with the strategies in place. I think that there needs to be more time allotted for the first time at PRC. But it's just, we're going forward, yeah, 7 to 10 minutes, great, but when we have to talk about all the child's strengths and needs, or even when there's a big change, and I don't know how we process that. There's a talk here about, what is that one about for this? What am I finding? I'll find it. Talks about accessing the safety plan. And the safety plan can be hard to access depending on the principal and the needs of the child.
Page 11.
Yeah, there it is, right? So just this year, I've talked to 3 different families who've requested safety plans who were not able to access it because there seems to be no eligibility requirements. Even just a statement that says that there could be eligibility requirements to access these things may help the families understand that it's not just that I have to ask for it, but I also have to meet some requirements. So I think I'm lost.
Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead.
We thought it was a document that was really able to articulate kind of the pieces of what an FRC is. One of the things that we were just wondering about, like when we were looking at, like slide 6 and then going over to or even like what's on page 3 and 4. If we were wondering if some of this information was the voice notes that you're looking at versus the slide note, just because we thought it was some of the pieces were repetitive. So that's what was our wondering. Other things that we discussed as well that we noticed, my one thing that I noticed, just now at the end was the transportation. So usually we have the piece for transportation. So a lot of our students, when we look at those 5 placements, I know that ours that are in like a small classroom, there is the transportation. And then there's the conversation, do they have an educational assistant support that is needed by all of us?
We talked about.
The contract, there's a lot of things that we also look at, like that we had as well, that just additional information.
Thank you.
So yes, we echo the consistent font sizing. So sometimes we thought we were being yelled at. So I think overall, I think our general, like, again, a lot of repeating stuff. I think a lot of our general stuff is, a lot of this is very word heavy. So we're thinking most of this should all become voice notes and bullet point things. Like, if this is meant to be a really quick hit guide to speaking to accessible language and things like that, you don't want paragraphs. You want bullet points, quick hit things, like just the example, of the, what happens during the IPRC meeting on slide 13 is the chairperson begins the meeting with welcoming all attendees and initiating introductions. Well, that's pretty standard for most meetings. Is that really necessary to actually put a sentence in? You could just go, intros and goal setting, and then, something like simple like that versus, and then all of those little pieces then speaking to some of the additionals that you would want to get out of it. Talking about transportation and required and that sort of thing. So yeah, if we could do that, then that would also translate itself into more consistent font sizing, because then I'm finding like there's no lung space on some of these, and it's really forgetting yet, so. What else do we
It's
have?
visually overwhelming.
That's exactly, it's visually overwhelming, so then it becomes unattractive, I think is kind of it's not the intention of what we're trying to do. A lot of sort of repeating. We've noticed on several slides saying the same information. It's just like, it's a little paragraph or a sentence, but you talked about it earlier already, or, so that not necessarily we can kind of pull all that out. Couple of questions, I think, just in terms of, there's a slight difference in process versus this is the first time a family is having an IPRC with may or may not have an IEP. So there are going to be different things that you're going to be talking about and discussing, like you said, I'm usually like, mine with my son is like, hey, how was your summer? And, you know, and then, okay, there's, you know, hey, are we still good with this? Yes, we are. Anything new, different, something else we have to consider. It's all of the differences versus the, okay, here's what this is what this means, this is what the support is, you know, that sort of thing. So there's different conversations that are being had, so we may need to differentiate that. I think that was it, there's more repetition. Yeah, and I think this last one was here on slide 17, we talked about placement, regular class with indirect support. But that's the only placement we go into that level of detail on it, and I don't know why it's there, because it's actually 2 slides in front of the list of placement options. So I don't know if we need to either itemize all of them like that, or just pull that out. And then I think, yeah, that's basically it, just more, so is there anything else? Programs. Oh, great, and then we did not know what slide 5, programming supporting as a title meant. Here. I couldn't put that in a brain around it, but if we're gonna pull most of that out anyway, it might be irrelevant. We're gonna pin down there.
And you did make a grade 5 language.
Yes, we also did as well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
But we're gonna stick a sentence.
you may have it.
Thank you.
Pretty much as far as what was said around the table, one was, who you taking your time to do the language, and you start off, you have some where it says the parent, and the other words you say you, you're talking to parents, is you are, make it the words carry. We're supposed to be inclusive, and we're supposed to be connecting, we're supposed to be connecting to the parent, then use that language that you are important, you, and always putting the student first. So, and again, we noted the comment about, you know, when, there's a variety of programs, placements, but then if you're going, there was a statement on slide, actually slide 3, page 2, says a strong emphasis is placed on inclusion of students with special education strengths and needs, and if that's a strong emphasis, put that first. And then we're saying there is a variety of that we can meet, you know, the different needs as far as that's concerned. The other thing is again, we talked about the importance of parents on slide 7, page 4. But later on, we talk about, you know, having, and you talk there about, that there's language interpretation service needed. But you also don't, I get the fact that they can represent it right there, that, so it's more important to put that up front. Because they can bring an advocate, because that's their support to make them comfortable, so that's really key to put that up. You mentioned it way back when you're planning a meeting, but again, it's the comfort of the parent first. I think that's,
Yeah, we were also talking about the first page, because this is referring to students with special education strengths and needs. We think that paragraph, that part should go before the multi-year strategic plan guiding principles. So you say this, you know, for the students with special education strengths and needs, RPRC and IB be a resource, and then say are built upon these guiding principles, right? So, because the first part is specific to the student, right? So the other information is really important as well. Oh, and the other thing I had just noticed is on slide 11, page 6. There's an asterisk beside age in the first paragraph. So you're talking parents or guardians and students 16 years of age. And I don't know what that's referring to, because I don't see a connector, yeah. Underneath, so.
Thank you. All of your points are really important and we'll embed in that. make sure that we film into the next version, so thank you. Really, really important and valuable.
Yeah, it's awesome. Right, thank you, everybody. Moving on then to the open discussion, we were talking the advocacy webinar series. So, are we going off for this? Because we were talking about it in public before. Because we kind of don't wanna spill the beans before we spill the beans. So,
Are you looking to pause?
yeah, we're gonna have to take, please take care of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Just for a moment,
Yeah,
just while we. No, I don't think it's. I can send the CF group the information, the slide deck that he sent earlier today. He sent that to all of us, right? Did he not send it to you? No, just to me, the slide deck.
Maybe I was not.
I think he sent it to you and I.
I think what you will have to decide is what the focus of the recording is, if it's. Cause I think at one point it was around advocacy within engaging with the school system around your child.
I think
Was a topic, I think that wrote it, but then also introducing SEAC, so I think we just have to tease out.
I thought we had switched it to focusing on something like an IPRC.
Yeah.
IEP, which is what we reached out to Rowan for.
Which would tie into this document.
It would tie into that.
Right, tie into the document. I would flip, if you just sent it to me, I'll flip to the rest of SEAC. The slide deck. That he sent me from his contact, and then we can kind of take a look at that. Yes, take a look at it as well, we can talk about it. But whether or not we want to go forward with that at the meeting.
And then I think Allison was asking separately around the association and thank you overviews to SEAC, I think as a separate thing.
Yes.
Okay. Right, anybody else, anything else? Okay. All right.
Great.
Okay, are we allowed to get?
Yes.
Yep, okay, wonderful. Okay, then we are going to move on to the business arising from the minutes. Finalizing the SEAC obligations and expectations.
Are done in line, unless yes, there's anything.
Okay, right, perfect.
Thank you for all your feedback, we caught all of it in the revised document. If there's any concerns, please let us know. But we have used that document to replace the outdated handbook on the website.
Okay. Perfect. Association, committee reports. Does anybody have any association reports this month?
That's not a report, but my, what's the backup person called again?
Alternate.
My alternate, was a better word for it. I was expecting her to be here today. I don't know why she wasn't. She'd like to attend as well. We do know that only one of us can vote. But Lisa, I'd also like to send her name again so that she can be welcome with another little inside as well. She has one here. It's a bus around.
Great, yeah, first one, beautiful.
I hope she'll come next month.
Anybody else? No? Okay, moving on then, we don't have any correspondence, well, we did have correspondence, kind of, I received an email today, from, Morgan Cameron, our other member at large, and unfortunately she has resigned. So we are going to have to, look for another member at large, which means we need a selection committee.
Through your check.
Yeah.
Because Liz moved recently from an association position to member at large, through that process, we do have a fairly recent posting as well as documentation about the role. So at the direction of SEAC, we could move that forward in publication and sharing the opportunity with community. Should you so wish, or if you want us to bring it back in October. So happy to roll forward with just updating dates and or bring it back for your purview in October. We will take direction from SEAC.
Okay, anybody have any concerns about just kind of refreshing the one we did? And sending it out, or how fast do we want to do this, or do you want to see it at the table? Do you want the copy to be sent with them to us? Okay, all in favor of just updating it and sending it out? All right, nobody can ask the next one. Straightforward. The next thing is, anybody wish to be part of the selection committee? Subcommittee, because we'll have to sit down with the applicant, the applications we receive, go over them, and then select from there. Usually there's usually 3 people on the committee. Allison, okay, anybody else? Okay, Elizabeth, okay. Anybody else?
I always say that trustees shouldn't be on it, because we do the final approval of the person or though at board, even though we've never turned anybody away at board.
I should be able to do it.
But yeah.
If nobody else wants, I just want to give people around the table the choice to do that. So,
And the
okay,
subcommittee, many will make recommendations, and then the recommendations come here. SEAC makes the recommendation to board.
okay, and then we'll sit down with them after the closing day. We'll have to figure out an evening to get together to review those. We've typically just did it over dinner one night to go through them and select somebody, okay? All right, community concerns, anybody have any, except for busing, you know, busing, the first week of school, of the school year, busing is always crazy. And there's lots of community concerns surrounding that, which usually get hammered out within the first 2 weeks. I literally once had my kid walking to school because they were on the bus, but, you know,
This is not a concern, it's a question from the beginning. That somebody very smart told me that. And you know how we said we had always unexpected students, right? When we did the budget, because I can't remember, we budgeted for those. And we, how far off are our numbers? From what we expected and what arrived.
We are, but what that will also mean is increased revenue to the district. So, what usually happens is we take a look as a team at what's called revised estimates. So there's an enrollment, there's a couple of dates of enrollment reports to the ministry. A really important one for us is October 31st. And that one is tied to changes to the budget into the district. So with the approval of the Board of Trustees, 50 additional educational assistants were added to the system for this September, which is phenomenal. Great expertise within that employee group and service of kids. We will continue to monitor. We have lots of conversations around our leadership team table, around our regulated health staff. As numbers grow, and our trustees have always been very supportive in terms of looking at what student needs are. We do try and project a slight buffer within our special education classes, but we do run them very tight to enrollment, just that balance of resourcing for kids. And so historically, we have not done major adjustments to special education classes. A little tweak in a couple of years, but generally our staffing stays static until the annual budget process. Because the jump is so large this year in terms of change in enrollment, we're just gonna have to wait and see and take a look at who the students are, where they come in and what their programming needs are, and not get too far ahead of that process in terms of what it means, because that also adds lots of staffing in classrooms and additional classes that way. So we're in a little bit of wait and see, but we do really appreciate that those 50 additional positions are quite substantive within the overall complement. But the increased enrollment does play against that as well, a little bit as well.
Although it, you know, again, it basically the additional, monies are per pupil amounts that basically get increases. And then when it comes down to some of the other, especially if you're talking about, this, special ed portion, then that requires an application or whatever, for staff to put in, that. So, you know, it's still, it is balancing out. Especially if it's a person that has come in new to the board and hasn't, or transferred to the board with not providing that additional information, which does happen, into this board, and requires, a lot of intensive support, then that is the child that has, it's a little bit more difficult to start with, but ISS does a really good job of trying to accommodate and put things through but we do eventually get the money, it's just not right up front, we're expected to provide the services. And then we get the money after. So it's a pupil amount, yes.
We'll keep SEAC informed as the fall.
Okay, any other questions or community concerns to raise? Oh. All right, moving on to celebrations and successes. Anybody have any celebrations and successes or anything? Another story, okay. Stories are always good.
Keep that going, so we went to the CNE for the first time in good world, I don't know, and, I was a very large wrestling fan. I was not aware of this until I got watching my videos like John Cena and the whole, you can't see me, and you know, all that fun stuff. And so at the CNE this year, they had like a wrestling little thing, so my neighbor, who apparently knows everybody, knows the guy who runs the wrestling company that was there, so got some of the wrestlers to come out and take photos with him. He got a photo with the family, the whole cast. I have like video and pictures of him just like being right into it and having a great time, and just, yeah, that was so really amazing that he was so enamored with the whole thing, and it was one of those things that they were like, the wrestlers themselves were like super into it as well, just seeing how into it he was, and you know, it's just one of these little venue kind of things. And that's that, but we had such a great time with it, so and I was really happy to see how well they were interacting with him and keeping him engaged and that sort of stuff, so it was kind of that. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome, that's cool, super cool. Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna plug my friend. So sort of the success, really. A good friend of mine, former work colleague, and just really all-around person, great person, wrote her own child's and illustrated this her own book for children. Naya Hatton, Let's Get Those Foils Crowned in Satin. And it's a story of a little girl who learns to love her textured hair. But what was great, is Denise and I were talking about, is in the back of this little book, it's got a little glossary of terms. So it talks about, you know, what each thing means. And, you know, she was saying, well, I always knew what like my white friends meant when they were talking about different things. Why shouldn't they? I was like, well, that's actually very true and brilliant. Anyway, so I purchased a couple extra that she signed to donate to the school board. I figure Andrea will probably figure out the best class to give it to, but she's also an Ajax resident, so she's local author now and artist too. I had no idea she had that talent for drawing as well. So I knew she was brilliant, but I didn't know she had that talent for drawing, so. Those are for the board. Yeah, and she'll go into schools and do little presentations and stuff. She's been at different events, so, yeah.
Can we get her contact information added to the minutes?
Yep. Yeah, she's an amazing person. I know she's on Instagram under, Naya, like, there you go. Oh, it's not all right. Yeah, they're great little books. I bought a little box set that I've got like, got private place on my bookshelf in my home office, so. So, anyway, and I hadn't seen her in quite some time, because I didn't know she moved back here. She wasn't, she lived in Scarborough, then she moved, I think it was for a while. And then came back, she's living in Ajax, so when I surprised her at the Ajax chapters, I found out she was living in Ajax, so that was fantastic. So, all right, our next SEAC meeting is October 3rd, 2024, right here. Anyone wants to make a motion to adjourn? Sarah, seconder? Allison, all in favor? Okay, motion adjourned, or to adjourn, passed.